because you've got little tiny humans who have a mind. It's different from their brain, and their brain is developing. It's not done. Some of your brains might not be done developing. And I help you look at the brain reasons for behavior and the mind methods to change that behavior, all in the context of relationship. I've been in this field 30 years and so much has changed. We used to do timeouts. We used to do just so many things different because we work with human beings and things change over time. But one thing that has never changed is the saying, it's all about relationships. How we consider those relationships has changed, but it's all about relationships. So today you'll get my training. It's just an introduction. It's only 3 hours to my series, Teaching with the Brain in Mind, because I want you guys to work smarter, not harder. I've done your job. It's way harder than my job. And I just want you guys to get the insight and the skills, not just the skills. People are always looking for strategies, but you need the insight too. And this understanding the brain and the mind in the context of relationships can really help you, number one, de-stress, and number two, feel more competent in the classroom. And of course, we're all here so that the children get what they need. So in a perfect world, I could now hear about all of you, but instead of that, I sent you that little poll. So thank you for those of you who filled that out. I really appreciate it. It gave me just a little sense of kind of where your mindset's at. And I'm going to invite you to check in throughout the day. If you have a question, please do ask it. If you have a comment, please do make the comment, all within the understanding of stepping up and stepping back. So if it's a comment that maybe you think you could just tell me one-on-one, that would be great. Or if you think the whole group would benefit, sure, please do. This is your time. I'm here for you. So to that end, let me be respectful and let you know where we're going. You should have a handout that has these PowerPoint slides in it. So I invite you to follow along. Today, our time, here's an overview of what we're planning to do. We'll see how much we get to. We're going to explore the brain reasons for behavior, how the brain how brain development impacts behavior. And then the understanding that all behavior is communication. People say that a lot, but when you're having challenging behavior in the classroom, it's really hard to be like, oh, you know what? He's pulling toys off the shelf and pushing them over. He's just communicating. And in fact, you never will do that. You'll never have that kind of, oh, that's nice, he's communicating. But I do want to invite you to have that mindset of, although the behavior is not okay, we still need to try to see the child behind the behavior and consider, what is this behavior trying to communicate? More on that later. We're going to consider how attuned engagement can prevent challenging behavior. So people are looking for strategies. And I'm going to give you something that's a sub-strategy. That's a foundation for any strategy you might get at any beautiful training, not just mine. So you have a lot of strategies you already use, but if you learn how to use attuned engagement, the strategies that you think don't work might all of a sudden start to work. And the focus, besides this attuned engagement, is always on promoting social emotional development. We know that the reason behind all challenging behavior has something to do with social and emotional development. And these tiny humans are nowhere near being fully developed. So you're always going to have challenging behavior in your classroom. In fact, when I see adults, I have challenging behavior. So even when your brain's fully developed as a human, there's challenging behavior. But I'm going to leave you with a message of hope to look at some mind methods for promoting this healthy development. So again, you work smarter, not harder. And then we'll have some reflection time built in. And really, I want to let you guys, you probably already know this, but in case you didn't, any training or strategy isn't effective if you don't believe in it. If somebody comes to you and says, teacher Janae, you have to do this visual schedule. You have to do it. You got to put it up, make it on Eckers is coming, Itters is coming, whatever. We're having class, you got to put it up. But no one's taken the time to explain to you what the purpose is, how it can help you, and listen to you, consider your hesitancy or your concerns or your questions. That strategy is not going to work long term. In fact, most people just use it until the assessment's over and then they don't use it at all. And I'm more interested in offering you some things. And then you think about it. How does this align with my values, perceptions, and beliefs? How does it not align? In order to have second order change, which is lasting change, you have to believe in this stuff. If you don't believe in it, it's really just going to be first order change, which is temporary change. And it probably will leave you frustrated. So I'm not going to tell you what to think. Not at all. That's totally up to you. I'm just going to offer you time to reflect on that. So if you notice I'm offering ideas or strategies or anything, and you think, I totally don't believe that, put a pin in that, notice that, and reflect on that with a trusted other later, or ask me to reflect with you on it. I'm totally open to that too. I want to hear that perspective. And then we'll do some planning. And in your breakout groups, we'll do some planning and reflecting. And I do invite you to do some with me too, right? You don't have to wait till that time to do it. Okay. So one of the things I draw upon to make these trainings meaningful is adult learning theory. So as a person who provides trainings, I have to understand how trainings I can maximize their impact. Well, 90 minutes is the most that's been studied that adults can take in new information and effectively learn. 90 minutes, you guys. After 90 minutes, the rate on investment return for the training falls off. So we're here for 3 hours. So I'm going to try to make it, and then we're here for another 3 hours, right? We're here for 6 hours. So I'm going to try to make it as engaging as possible or as meaningful as possible, built in as many opportunities for you to maximize your learning as possible. Okay. And this is the first one. So I'm going to invite everybody to take out a piece of paper, or if you have electronics, use that. And I'm going to ask you to write down, not just think about, but to write down what you hope to gain from this training. Now I've given you the overview. And some of you wrote that in the poll, right? I want strategies for challenge behavior. See if you can get super specific. You're here for 3 hours. What do you hope to gain? And then think about this. What also might you hope to let go of? And what I mean by that is if you're going to try to get something, you might have to let go of something. Maybe it's a belief, maybe it's a habit. I don't know. It's just an invitation. And then the third question, envision these things while imagining what's required of you to receive. A lot of you are givers and doers and fixers. Why don't you step back and you're here to receive. I'm here to give to you today. You're here to sit back, relax, and receive. But what might you need to do to be able to receive? Just something to consider. I'm going to be quiet for about 3 minutes and let you guys go ahead and focus on these answers. Let me know if there's any questions. Just take another minute or so if you need it. If you're done, great. But I'll just give you another minute for those of you who are still writing. All right, if you need more time, please just take it. And you're welcome to keep writing. And then I'm going to encourage you just to check in for yourselves throughout the 3 hours and see if you are getting what you hope to gain, letting go of what you hope to let go of, and doing what you need to receive. And if not, let me know how I can help. I'm happy to be a part of that. So when I gave you guys the poll, one of the reasons I did that was, in a perfect world, I'd come out to your classrooms and watch and see what you're doing and learn about your program. Unfortunately, no one can pay to have that done. So I just wanted to get a sampling of where your mindset, as I mentioned, was in regard to children with challenging behavior, social emotional development, brain development, just to try to start to attune, to model for you what I'm hoping that you will start to practice in terms of attuned engagement. So let's just take a second here to go over what we've learned, to kind of level set expectations about. I created the training around what you guys said, where you guys said you were at in regard to this. So let's get this, poll 1. Okay. So which of the following is most challenging for you as a teacher? So overwhelmingly, over 52% said intervening with challenging behavior. And this is pretty much what I typically hear. It doesn't mean these other things aren't challenging. We have a lot on our plates as preschool teachers. And even the work that I'm going to do with you today will help you with every single thing that you might have chosen for that is challenging. Keeping children engaged during circle transitions, teaching academic skills. It's really amazing how this is all going to be linked. When you teach with the brain in mind, your job definitely gets easier. When a child has challenging behavior, which might you do, and you could choose more than one. So just want to get a sampling of where you might be coming from in terms of when a child actually does have challenging behavior, what do you do? And the majority here said, I love this, pause to consider what's going on for the child and work to help the child express their needs. That's child first teaching, everybody. And that's really important. That mindset that the child has an interior landscape, he, she, they have needs. So the challenging behavior is communicating something, albeit inappropriately. I live in that world, but it's really important. Some adults that I work with, teachers, parents, I do a lot of parent trainings, don't even consider the child has an interior landscape. It is shocking to them to think, they're like, oh, they're only 3, they're only 4. What would they be actually needing? You know, they have a great life. What could be going wrong for them? So really nice teachers. When children have challenging behavior, I get very stressed out. Yeah, it's stressful. So it's stressful. So it's so funny. Here's the interesting thing that parents are always just so shocked when I talk to them about. So I'm working with a family right now, and they have 3 tiny humans under the age of 5, 2 4-year-old girls, and then a 2-year-old boy. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is just, it's intense. It's stressful. And then I said to them, imagine what it's like for your kids' preschool teachers, the 2 girls. And they're like, oh, that's fine for them. They got 3 adults there, whatever. Like, oh, hold the fort. They have 25 kids. They have 25 tiny humans, all having different needs, all having different, having to corral and work with all of them. So yes, it's stressful. The first time my 2-year-old, my daughter was very easy. And the first time I said, we're going to go to the park. Let's put your shoes on. She said, no. And she threw her shoes at me. I could not believe how intense that was. I mean, I was 23 years old. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that kids would do something like that. So now that you know, it's still stressful, because one of the things that stresses you out is when children are having challenging behavior, it brings up a sense of incompetence or worthlessness or helplessness or overwhelm in us, because our job is to keep, number one, everybody safe. And then beyond that, we're asked to do so many other things as teachers. So yeah, stressed. I believe challenging behavior in children is, and check all the boxes. And these are all, important. I just wanted to see what you thought. And I'm glad that nobody checked the parent's job to deal with, not mine. I've had people check that before. And then I want to think to myself, just kindly and compassionately, what are you doing as a teacher then? It might not be a good fit. So luckily, nobody was into that. And then this one about a child's way to get attention. That's a commonly held belief. Over 57.9% of the people said that. And we'll kind of unpack that a little bit today, not as much as I do in future trainings, but no child ever has a behavior just to get attention. So I'll just put that out there. It's another need. And we often think it's attention. And the reason I think this is important is people often get mad. She's just doing it for attention. If there was this, she's trying to do it for attention. Let me help. Then I wouldn't be as driven to help you update your mindset about that. Okay, so we'll talk about that later today. And this idea about, do you have a similar approach in the classroom? This is another thing to consider. If we've got 2 adults or 3 adults or however many in a classroom, and people are doing different things, pretty different, right? You're individuals, so your style is different. But if you're having a different approach, so if they go to one teacher and the teacher shames and blames them, and they go to the other and the teacher's walking them through the steps of conflict resolution, it creates more challenging behavior in your classroom. So when I offer trainings, I always ask the people I work with, send the whole team. All right. I see teachers as every adult in the room. I don't make the lead teacher, assistant, associate. I don't do that. It's every adult has an important role in a child's life, and every adult matters. So I want you all to get similar exposure. And then the way you implement what I expose you to will look different because you're different people. But I want you to come to some sort of agreements about systematic approaches, because it can be very challenging for the child and for the teachers if everybody's not on the same page. And then this was fun. You guys are confident about how brain development impacts children's behavior. So I'm thinking, oh goodness, I got to bring my A game. I got to give you something new. And I will be, because most of you didn't even know who Dan Siegel was. So I'll possibly be giving you something new. Maybe you just didn't know that some of this was his stuff that I'm building upon, but that's great. I'm glad you have a strong foundation. And then I want to just bring some novelty to that, give you some maybe additional and new information. And then here's what you guys were asking for sure. I'm on board. A lot of it is challenging behavior and strategies. So I'll pause there for a second. With that, do any questions come up before we launch in? Again, you don't have to wait for me to pause, but I'll pause there and just check in. Thoughts, questions?
We're doing well, Laura. Thank you. We did have quite a bit of technology, so all the room shift. We're not rude people. You see all of our backs to you. It's like, nope, we don't want to see her anymore.
That would not be the first time that's happened. It's been said before. Well, I'm done with her.
So anyway, yeah, we for lunchtime, we'll get the other monitor going. Of course, it's never happened in BCOE history, but when Colleen has a training, it happens.
Okay. Colleen, that is so funny, because I live in the world. I'm a redhead, so I'm a mutant. So I've always been different my whole life. But I swear to God, if I had a nickel for every time a doctor or somebody said, that's never happened before, I would be rich. So
that's me too.
Girl, you and me, all right, real talk. So sorry, everybody, you got Colleen and I, things are going to get real fast with us. Yeah, that's okay. I didn't think you were rude. And I meant to say, I'm glad you said this. If people want to get up and walk around, I had someone last week doing yoga. Take care of you. y'all are fully grown. You do you. Whatever's going to help you the most. And I know you're not used to sitting. So do, please. I don't think it's rude as long as you're not interrupting anybody else. I want you to do self-care. So thanks, Colleen. That was helpful. All right, so let's launch. So I just want to have you guys take a moment to consider this Carl Jung quote. He's a psychologist. If there's something we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it's not something that could be better changed in ourselves. So I take a deep breath as I say this, because this isn't to shame and blame you. You're not bad. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just knowing we work with humans, not Hondas. And what I mean by that is you can't take a human into the shop, plug him or her, them into a computer and learn what's going on with them. They're complicated. There's a lot going on. So the best place to start is for you to always be updating, and just considering. So I've heard people say a lot of times, I've been in this field 20 years. I've always done it this way. And I have total respect. I've been in the field that long as well. And I hardly do anything the same way that I did 20 years ago. Not to make anyone wrong and me right, but we want to really always be open and receptive to change and updating, because we learn more. Scientists, that's not me. I take their work and go, oh, I didn't know that. That's new. I better do X differently. And then also the reason this quote is relevant for us is because the children's brains aren't fully developed. And so expecting them to make really big changes is really inappropriate in terms of what their capacity is. So how can I change to meet them halfway so they can make the change? So I'm not saying we let challenging behavior sit. Absolutely not. But when you see the child behind the behavior, you realize they need you to do something different. Maybe it starts there in order for them to do something different. So it's a team, but it starts. It just says starts. Okay. Does anybody have any feedback about that? Anything come up? Thoughts, questions? Sometimes this quote really fires up the room, but that's okay. I don't mind if you're fired up. Just let me know. We okay?
Yeah, Laura, we work as a team really hard to be reflective.
Nice.
But reflection is not always easy. So do you have anything you could say about that? Like, this is a good way to start a reflection thought in your head.
Yeah. So first of all, the afternoon will really help with that. We want to start with compassion, loving kindness, and non-judgment for ourselves. Always. So a lot of us have a voice in our head. I call her the inner critic, or him, them, the inner critic. And it's, why did you do that? You're an idiot. Oh, you should know better. I want to give her a coffee break. And whenever you're reflecting, it's compassion, love, and non-judgment. The other thing is videotape, videotape, videotape. We're in the movie, we can't see our movie. So reflection is really hindered by just sitting down and thinking about our practice. So when I come into a classroom, I have clips, right? I've been in there for an hour and I have clips, and I show like 1 to 3 minute clips of every single teacher in the classroom, and we reflect from strengths, what's going well in terms of what we're working on. And then we look at next steps. But when people see the video, they're shocked. They're like, I didn't know I did that. Good or, things that need to be worked on. So if we're left alone in our head without adult supervision, we're going to get it wrong. So reflection really can't happen effectively unless we're able to see our practice. In the old days before video, I used to come in as the coach and try to write down everything the teachers were doing and then reflect on it with them. And then I realized, like, how egotistical is that? Like, as if I can see everything. So I just think the gift is video. Set the video up, set the iPad up, whatever technology you guys have, because it really is a game changer. Even when I'm having 3 adults in the room looking at a video clip, people see different things. It is fascinating. And there's a lot of brain reasons for that. So one example is, did you ever hear about eyewitnesses? They stand on the same corner, they see an accident and they see totally different things. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. But non-judgment, compassion, loving kindness, always. And we'll learn about that when we talk about resilience. Yeah. So let's start with, even though I know you guys are experts on the brain, I just want to give you, actually, give me a show of hands. How many people have learned the brain in the palm of the hand technique? The brain in the palm of the hand technique, a couple of people. Okay, beautiful. Even if you learned it, this is a great opportunity to just kind of revisit it so that it may be eventually something you explain to the kids, you explain to the parents, you train others on it. But also it's just good. I'm going to probably add in some new stuff. There's some cutting edge research that's out there. So the idea is, and this is from Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson in their book, Whole Brain Child, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. Whole Brain Child. You parents, everybody, I tell everybody to read it. So the idea here is that the brain develops like a two-story house. There's the downstairs that develops first and the upstairs that develops second. Makes sense, right? Can't build the upstairs to have the downstairs fully developed. So in this model of the brain, the downstairs includes, and this is ever changing based on research, so don't think you're going to just have to learn this once, this changes. The downstairs brain in this hand model is this part of your hand, the base of your hand, and this is your spinal cord, right? But this is the part of your skull, the base of your skull. This part is the diencephalon, and then this is the limbic region. So you have the brain stem, sorry, I didn't say that, diencephalon and the limbic system. They make up the downstairs brain. And this is the first part of the brain to fully develop. Things like automatic functions. You don't have to tell your heart to beat or your blood pressure to regulate or your temperature. Things we gratefully don't have to think about. Arousal and attention. So just even being aroused, being alert. But in particular, the brain stem, this primitive part of the brain, basic part of the brain downstairs, is always scanning for, is this good? Is this bad? Should I go towards it? Should I go away from it? Should I avoid this? Should I approach it? It's constantly categorizing things based on its assessment. This part, primarily this part, is this a signal of welcome or a signal of warning? That's language from polyvagal theory. Welcome versus warning. And it's elegant language instead of, is this safe or is this dangerous? That's real too. They're the same thing. I just like the welcome and warning. Just feels really elegant to me. So I offer it to you. So these little kids' brains are constantly searching. Is this a signal of welcome? Is this a signal of warning? And here's the rub. It depends what their nervous system thinks, not what you think. So getting the red sippy cup, not getting the red sippy cup might not seem like a signal of warning to you, but to a 2-year-old it does, a 4-year-old it does, or this 5-year-old in this moment. So just to know, welcome and warning. Motor regulation, sleep and wake, motivation, seeking pleasure, seeking reward, approaching that. We're fully developed right out of utero to go toward pleasure and toward reward and to avoid danger. I think we all know that. Sexual behavior, downstairs brain too. So whenever people get real nervous about any sexual behavior in preschool, it's just really helpful to understand that we come into the world wired to be sexual beings. It's a brain thing. And then attachment. So I mentioned we have these 2 drives: to approach welcome, to approach safety, to avoid danger, to avoid warning. But attach is the 3rd drive. Approach, attach, avoid, attach. These are our brain's drives. The way we do it, our mind gets involved, our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions and beliefs. But from a hardware perspective, our brain, our hardware, we are driven to do so, to attach. And thank goodness, because we, unlike other mammals, come out of the womb not fully developed yet. And it's that attachment that keeps us alive. Emotional reactivity. Now, don't hear me saying that emotions are in the downstairs brain. They don't exist anywhere. But this intensity, this emotional reactivity starts when the downstairs brain picks up on signals of warning. Emotional reactivity is predominantly about signals of distress or warning, but it can also be signals of pleasure. You ever had that really exuberant child who chokes people as they laugh? They get super excited, or your kids who are running around the room and like really happy, but just it's super intense. Emotional reactivity. They're not having emotions in a balanced state. That's the downstairs brain. And then you all know most likely about the 4 F's of the autonomic nervous system. So when our brain picks up on danger, we either fight, flee, freeze, or faint, the 4 F's. So most people know that. So adults, children have the capacity fight, flight, freeze, or faint. So we used to tell people to let their babies cry it out in the crib, right? When little infants would be crying, it'd be like, oh, just let them cry it out. Well, what scientists learned was they weren't just crying it out, they were actually going into that 4th F. So when babies cry and no one responds, their nervous system exceeds its window of tolerance and they actually faint. So that's why we took that off the docket. No more crying it out. No, when babies cry, they need us to respond. So for their nervous system to develop in a healthy way, because freezing and fainting is a really unhealthy place in the nervous system. And this is really relevant for preschool teachers because the way we respond or react, those are 2 different things, to children's challenging behavior can impact whether this freeze and faint part of their nervous system gets overdeveloped. The nervous system's healthiest response is fight or flee. I know it doesn't always feel healthy, y'all. I get it. But in terms of just neurological development, we don't want kids going into that second part because the freeze and faint can be really, really harmful. It's been found now that there's more to it. And let me add this. When they're on their way, when they fight or flee and it doesn't work and they go into freeze or faint, they're also going into a state of collapse. It's been found. And now we've added in 2 more F's. They're either folding or fawning. How many people have heard about folding and fawning? Okay, here's some new stuff. So Dr. Bruce Perry, who is an incredible psychologist, does great work in our field, wrote a seminal work called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, studies trauma. I draw for him all the time. He's the one who introduced me to this concept. And the idea is when the nervous system is developing and it gets repeated insults, right? Repeatedly isn't met with attuned caregiving, with attachment figures who are safe, who see the child, who soothe the child. The nervous system starts to develop a sense that I can't count on others to soothe me. So I've got to soothe myself. And way to soothe oneself is to detach from what's happening. So totally collapse. Did you ever go silent when something happened, like you freeze and wish you had said something differently later? That's like a mini version of that. You're still in freeze there. But some people actually, when they get overwhelmed, they dissociate. So during that freeze response, it's more intense and people may feel numb and their minds and bodies separate. And we're often going through the motions in order to endure rather than act. And this often looks like avoidance or compliance. So this is interesting. A highly compliant child or a highly compliant adult, like I have people pleasers in my life. I'm like, oh, they're always people pleasing. And that can look really great and feel really great, but it can be the nervous system's coping mechanism for wanting to avoid threat or danger. It can be overdone. Compliance and pleasing can be overdone. It actually can get kids in dangerous situations. So it's just something to explore, that even though the children who are quiet and behaving nicely in our classroom could be doing so from a completely integrated brain, and that's healthy, there are those children who withdraw, go selectively mute, or are always striving to be perfect, and they're not in a healthy place in their nervous system. And the children that get most of our attention, and I understand I was a teacher, are the ones who are fighting or fleeing. I just want you to know that there's this other aspect of the nervous system that all children need attuned engagement. They need you tuning in and understanding that just because they're quiet doesn't mean it's good. And here's my biggest example of that is really illustrative. I was working with a program for a while, and there was one male teacher, Mr. Mike, and he was huge. And when teachers would have children with challenging the behavior that they couldn't get to shift gears, they would call in Mr. Mike. And you guys know how this story is going to end. Mr. Mike comes through the door and he's big and he has a deep voice, and the kids zip it up. And Mr. Mike would say, you need to listen to your teachers. I don't want to have to come back here. You know, Miss Fish is really trying to help you. Whatever. That's putting the child into a state of collapse. They're freezing, they're shutting it down because they feel threatened. We don't threaten children. So parents will say to me all the time, I just give them the look still, or I that to me is, a shortcut you use that actually could have harmful effects on your kids. We don't want to do that. We've learned that that's not healthy for kids. Okay. So this is your downstairs brain. This is the part of the brain fully developed when babies are born. All humans have the ability to do this. The upstairs brain, in the brain in the palm of the hand model, now I go like this, and now you can see the upstairs is this whole part. And if you look at my hand, it's connected to the downstairs. When we're in a healthy state, all the parts of our brain, stem, diencephalon, limbic, upstairs brain, connected. This is called integration. Different
Laura,
parts are linked. Yes.
can you stop for 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm not ready to go upstairs yet.
Yeah. Girl, let's get back downstairs. What do you need?
So I heard a lot about a lot of new information about crying it out, about having children, collapse, and those kiddos. I mean, we've seen it in the classroom where they just, they just all of a sudden go quiet or go to sleep. And that's what you're talking about. Even when we're holding them and comforting them, they go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what you're talking about.
It can be. Sometimes they go to sleep because you have soothed them and they're coming out of that into a transition. That could be that too, right? So it's not one size fits all. It's just a wondering. So in that moment, if I'm holding someone and they sleep, I might start to consider what I know about the child in entirety and be like, is this a pattern? Is this just a one-time thing and he just didn't sleep last night? Or do I think this is a pattern? Right. So that would be something I'd be curious about. Not certain, but curious. We always have to be curious because we can't be certain. That's why when people say, what do I do when a child bites? I say, I don't know, because I can't be certain. Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing that came to mind is a lot of the upstairs brain development happens outside of our classrooms. And then it would be our job to do the individualization in order to get their needs met. Is there anything that you can tell us now, or maybe it'll come later, about supporting children to be resilient?
Wow. Everything I'm going to tell you is about supporting children to be resilient. So the first thing I've already told you is children will be resilient if their caregivers understand this stuff. So it starts with us. Right? So knowing about this stuff will help the children be more resilient because children grow in the context of relationships. And if you'll let me, Colleen, I will offer that when we get to the upstairs brain, you said the upstairs brain development happens outside the preschool classroom. I would say most of it happens inside the preschool classroom, unless children are
I said downstairs.
Oh,
we're downstairs, right? Are we downstairs or upstairs?
We're downstairs, but you said upstairs. Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. So you meant the downstairs brain development happens outside. I would say still, it depends how long they're in the preschool classroom. So I think you said you have half-day programs, right?
Correct, 3 hours.
Yeah, so 3 hours. So it might be balanced, right? So if kids go to programs 6 hours a day, I would argue they get most of it in the classroom. But you're right, it's a combination of what happens outside and inside, always, for sure. Like that kid sleeping in your arms, you might think like, oh my gosh, I in the classroom I don't see anything that might feel threatening to that child, so that they would collapse. But you don't know, perhaps some of it's coming from unmet needs at home, right? So that's the dance we
Right.
always do, is we don't want to shame and blame the parents. That's not what I'm doing, but just
Right.
consider outside influences on that, for sure.
Right.
Yep.
And I was wondering, I guess where my brain went is if there is a child who is consistently put to bed at 7 and left to cry it out, and
Oh,
then he
yeah.
comes to
Yes.
me,
Yes.
then there's already some of that going on. And
Yes.
my work is to attach and to know him and to support him in him being resilient. Correct? That's
Totally.
what I was talking
100%.
about.
No, you got
I
it.
was saying home.
Yep. No, you got it. So what we call that is a setting event. So if a child is experiencing being left to cry it out, that is wiring his brain in such a way that his brain is learning that the world is dangerous and that adults don't soothe him and that he's left on his own. And just think about for us, if we were just left on our own like that, right? Like it's just, some of us are introverts. I'm an introvert. I don't mind being alone, but I'm also 53. I'm not 4. So just imagine what that's like for a child. That's really hard. So it's a setting event because that sets the child up for having an imbalance when he walks through your doors. So people say behavior came out of nowhere. The behavior never comes out of nowhere. Never, never, never does a child hit, bite, punch, kick, spit out of nowhere. There's always a brain reason. So what you're on about, Colleen, is for sure, if they had to cry it out the night before, even if he's walking through your door with a little smile on his face, cortisol levels that spike in children take up to 72 hours to come back to baseline. Cortisol is the stress hormone. So if he's stressing out and he's crying himself to sleep, for sure, it predisposes that child for challenging behavior. So you are the protective factor. To build resilience, you have to be in a mindset of saying, what's up with Derek? Maybe it's that, right? So your understanding of this stuff is part of the way to build resilience in children. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for stopping. Okay, now you ready to go upstairs? Can we get up the staircase? We'll climb the staircase, we'll go upstairs. And what do we have up there? Well, we have the cortex is this large part, and then from the knuckle down to the fingernails, Dan Siegel calls this the prefrontal cortex, because this is his model. And this is where we want children to reside in our classrooms, to have that run smoothly, right? So these are things such as focal attention, paying attention. So there's diffuse attention and focal attention. Did you ever drive somewhere and forget how you got there? Yeah, all the time. You're paying attention, but it's diffuse attention. You really want, and kids are using diffuse attention much of the day. You really try to get them to pay focal attention, to really tune in. Like when you first were driving a car and hands 10 and 2, and you were really tuned in, focal attention. Language development, creativity, abstract thinking. Abstract thinking is really, really challenging. And even though we don't mean to, we often ask children to do this abstract thinking. Especially interestingly, a form of abstract thinking is when you're trying to share your perspective and what you believe is important. And the child's like, in my world, that's not even close. Like having them be able to understand your perspective is a form of abstract thinking that's really challenging for children. Doesn't mean we don't try to teach them, but that's really hard for people to do. In fact, one of the things I do as a therapist is I try to teach adults perspective taking. People are not great at it. And we're asking these tiny humans to do it, for them to consider what you think they need, what's important to you, like getting to circle, washing your hands, transitioning, putting toys away. They don't need any of that. You need it. And you're trying to teach them because eventually they will need it. I'm being funny, but they will need it because they will need to be part of a community and learn how a classroom goes, because we've got that school readiness coming up, right? So here's the big ones I want to focus on today in the upstairs brain: impulse control, executive functioning, and the 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex. So let me walk you through that. Y'all know what impulse control is, but executive functioning skills. So probably by now, if you know about the brain, you've heard a lot about executive function skills. And if you go to my website, I have an article I've written about executive function skills. Really, really important for children in this age range, but also for definitely once they get to K, need those executive function skills. This is the ability to plan, initiate, organize, and carry out a task, shifting gears when necessary, regulating your emotions, resolving conflicts as they arise, and monitoring your ability to do so. Just that. Think about that. That's all learning. That's all functioning. I don't care what the content is: planning, initiating, organize, carrying out the task, shifting gears when necessary, resolving conflicts, managing emotions. That's like all social emotional development right there. And so it's believed currently, and this may change, that a lot of that functioning is housed in the upstairs brain. Doesn't mean the downstairs doesn't have input. It does. Upstairs and downstairs are connected, but a lot of those skills happen when the children are in their fully integrated brain. All the parts are connected. Now, the 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex. This is where Dan Siegel gets involved again and says, in particular, this part of the brain knuckles down things like attuned communication, which we're going to talk about today because it's so important. Physical regulation, emotional regulation, not emotional reactivity, emotional regulation. Fear modulation, because fear is such an intense driver in the human brain. Fear modulation. Cognitive flexibility, that executive function skill where you can shift gears when necessary. Someone told you that to turn right at the white church, and when you get there, the church is red. You go, well, it must be the same church, right? Or a child wanted to play in the block area and he goes and that block area is full. He shifts gears and makes a second choice. Insight, empathy, moral reasoning, intuition. These are all aspects of the upstairs brain, the cortex and prefrontal cortex, that are not fully developed in the children in your classroom. And then finally, when we are in the integrated brain and challenges arise, we are able to sometimes, much of the time, most of the time, I don't know, you figure it out for yourself, for you. Instead of reacting from the downstairs brain with fight, flight, freeze, faint, fold, or fawn, we use our social engagement circuitry. So it doesn't mean challenges don't happen. It means when they do, we respond from an integrated brain rather than react from the downstairs brain. In social engagement, this capacity for our brain to respond to challenges without fighting, fleeing, freezing, fading, folding, or fawning is from the polyvagal theory. So the idea is, and I do hold trainings on this, and maybe I'll do it for you guys in the future, but the social engagement center in the brain is called the green zone, because it's like, it's the green light. When we're in this integrated brain, our capacity to respond to challenges is amplified. When we're in the red zone, we're fighting or fleeing. And when we're in the blue zone, we're freezing, fainting, folding, or fawning. So there's zones in the brain that we use colors to help us understand and make sense of them, because the brain likes categories and making sense of things. But just so you know, because the children's upstairs brain isn't fully developed, they spend more time in the red or the blue zones, hopefully, than most adults. But for many of you, you might think, oh my goodness, híjole, I flip my lid all the time. I'm reacting versus responding. So let's take a closer look at that. So Dan Siegel talks about this as the fully developed brain. And when a challenge happens, or a series of challenges, we flip our lids and we react from the downstairs brain. Fight, flight, freeze, faint, fold, fawn. This is reactivity. Child, adult, doesn't matter. It's called that. When a challenge happens and we can stay in our integrated brain, not stay in the upstairs. I hear people say, stay in the upstairs. Hear me now. Stay in the integrated. We respond to the challenge from our social engagement centers. So to expect for a child to respond to challenges from this part of the brain all day long in a 3-hour program it's not appropriate to expect that. When they do it, hallelujah, that's fantastic. We must be really helping them meet their social emotional needs. We must be really attuned. Or is it that child just holding themselves together, white knuckling it? Are they really in just pleasing stance? Because I get the kids, the parents in therapy that say at program, she's great. And she comes home and she melts down. Yeah, it's because she's holding it together at program. So you also get the opposite where parents say they're perfect at home and at program it's not, right? I understand there's a world in which that exists, but I'm just letting you do a 360 view here of how important you understanding this brain development really is. So this is a strategy, you guys, because when I go into a preschool classroom, this is in my glasses. Everything I just said is in my glasses. So when I see a child pulling toys off the shelf, or I see a child going selectively mute, or I see a child running from the classroom, I'm considering all this stuff. It's my first thought, not what am I going to do, right? It's how am I going to understand the child first? Because if I'm just doing to the child, I'm working harder, not smarter. It doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have to act immediately. Right? Somebody does. You can't just sit back and go, but you have practiced enough so that you stay integrated and you approach that child as a signal of welcome, not a signal of warning, in order to start the process of getting their upstairs brain to come back online. They flip their lid and you need to be in your integrated brain to help their upstairs brain come back online. And we already saw in the pie chart that when children have challenging behavior, 86% of you said you get really, really, really stressed out. And I have compassion because it is stressful, but we also have to know then that we may be either our lid might be a little bit flipped or might be really flipped. And we're sending signals of warning because we're feeling danger. So this is why the afternoon's so important too. Because we don't get like 3 hours of therapy a week to work through things. Right? We're just told, go do your job. But I love what Colleen said, is you guys are super reflective. I would love for you to start to build this into your reflections. What's your understanding? And can you articulate it? It's interesting. I don't know. Do you guys do Eckers? Do you have Eckers come or class? I can't see anything. I'm looking at the wall, so I don't know if you do. But I was an Eckers evaluator. And
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay, good. Okay. So I was an Eckers evaluator, hated the job, hated being an Eckers evaluator. I like what's in it a lot of times, but I hated coming into the classroom and judging teachers at one point in time. But one of the things that would happen is I would have to bring the lead teacher in for an interview and ask the teacher, what do you do to teach friendship skills? What do you do? And I had watched the teacher do it. But when I asked the teacher to articulate it, she froze or said, well, I don't know. We just tell the kids to be friendly. So teachers aren't often given a chance to articulate their practice. And that can be a strategy. Talking about all this stuff so that you integrate it, you understand it. You know, I get better at this stuff the more I train other people on it. So just another tip for you guys to consider. Okay. Any questions about this? We're going to do a little activity here, but first, are there any questions about upstairs and downstairs brain and how it's relevant to your work with kids?
You're good, Laura. And I'm going to start, when you ask a question, I'm going to start using some, what do they call them? Annotates or whatever, the thumbs up
Nice. That would be lovely.
if we have questions. Will that work?
That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Ooh, and I just zoomed in and got to see you too. I love this zoom in thing you guys got going on. Butte County just rocks it. That is awesome. Look at the zoom. That's fun. There's people sitting there going, don't zoom in on me. I don't want to be zoomed in on. I hear you. Okay, so first exercise, just to get a sense and experience of this, I'm going to invite you to take part in this. If you choose not to, totally up to you, fully grown, but please just be still and respect that other people might want to take part in this. So I'm going to say a word to you 5 times, and I just want you to consider your body sensations, maybe your feelings. Feelings are emotions, angry, sad, mad, happy, whatever, just one word. Feelings are one word, not a sentence, by the way. And then any beliefs, any thoughts. I don't like that. This is good. I wish I had more coffee this morning. I don't know. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to say the word 5 times, and I'm going to ask you either to close your eyes as we do this, or for some people that's very destabilizing. So just cast the spotlight of your attention onto one thing. Don't be writing, don't be eating, don't be moving around. This is a mindfulness practice. We're using the mind to tune into the brain. Okay. This isn't meditation, but it's a mindfulness practice. And somebody said, I hope this training isn't about mindfulness. We've had a ton of it. So this training isn't about mindfulness, but I'm going to use your mindfulness skills that you've learned here. Okay. So just to get ready, the word 5 times, and then I'm going to pause and say another word 5 times. Okay. Closing your eyes. No. 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 Just make the U-turn inward and notice. Now we're going to shift to the second word, same thing. Just tune into your sensations, images, feelings, or thoughts. Yes. 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 So normally when I'm doing virtual, people will just type in the chat what came up for them when I said the no. But maybe we'll just have 1 or 2 people share when I did the no, any body sensations, images, feelings, or thoughts that came up when I said no. Or the other thing, people could shout out answers, and Lauren could just type them real quick in the chat, either one.
Lauren has left us.
Lauren has left the building. Okay.
It's not so cricket typing.
Okay.
One of the participants said increased heart rate.
Yep.
You yelled no. I also noticed the same when you yelled yes.
Okay, let's stick with no first, but that's great.
Oh,
That's
okay.
great. So that's great. So, and just like words, increased heart rate. What else? Shout them out, you guys, and she could just.
What else?
I was getting annoyed when she kept.
Annoyed.
And then it was positive when I felt positive when she was saying yes.
Okay, let's stick to just no. Thank you. See, I love the linking. Let's just stick to no. So annoyed, increased heart rate. What else?
Like a wall, a hardness
Yeah, a wall. And where did you feel that in your body?
on the outside, just right in front of me.
In front of you. And was there a body sensation linked to that wall being there?
Just, I wanted to push it.
Push
I
it.
wanted to push out wall that way.
Gorgeous. So we would call that as psychologists an urge that triggered an urge in you to push. Beautiful. What else? Thanks, guys. What else?
Flinching.
Flinching. Yeah. Oh, that's a good descriptive word. Flinching. Anybody have body sensations? So these annoying, flinching, increased heart rate's a body sensation, a wall, an urge, any other emotions or body sensations come up? Anger, emotion. Yeah, I feel you.
I felt almost like electricity.
Yeah. So a tingling and electricity. Yep. Body sensation. Really nice. Okay. So the idea is when all I'm doing is saying one word, right? All I'm doing is saying this word, different tone of voice inflection, just noticing how that one word can activate stuff in your brain, right? Just noticing. And now let's shift to the yes. What did you notice when I shifted to yes?
The second to last yes made me think that I was about to have a problem. Like
You
it
were-
sounded like somebody who was resigned to say yes, and I thought, oh no, it's going to be a long day.
So that's an interesting response, really. Do you have an understanding maybe of why you might have interpreted that way?
I don't know. Your voice sounded a little resigned, and when folks sound resigned when they say yes, then I feel like maybe it's not a yes they want to give. And I
Yeah,
feel like that's going to make my day longer.
that's so
And that's
interesting.
what I heard in your voice was a little bit of resignation. I don't know that that's what was there, but that's what I heard.
But you bring up a great point, because it doesn't matter if anybody else heard it, it's what your brain interpreted. So your mind had the story of, oh, it's going to be a long day. This person's really just saying it and don't really mean it. So your brain reacted to it that way. Isn't that interesting? So I'm guessing that what's going on is you heard in me something in the fold or fawn response. Yeah, that's fascinating. But it's just a great exercise to see your mind creates the story. Your mind is your mental activity, your thoughts, your feelings, your perceptions, your beliefs, and your brain is having the either response or the reactivity. So a lot of people reacted to the no, right? They reacted from the downstairs brain. They didn't like it. And then more people tend to respond from the upstairs brain with the yes, except you didn't. You had more of a downstairs brain reaction. That's okay. That's where the story of our experience impacts how we interpret the same information, right? We do it differently. Our stories impact how our brain responds or reacts. Great. How about other things that happened, sensations, images, feelings, or thoughts when we did the yes?
Warmth.
Warmth. So quite different, right? Warmth. What else?
Welcoming.
Welcoming.
Yeah.
Welcoming. Yeah. What else? Okay. Thank you, you guys. So this is called, this yes, no exercise is taken from, I just adapted it from Dan Siegel again in his book, The Yes Brain. This doesn't mean we only want to say yes to children. People have misinterpreted this exercise. It's a chance for you to experience maybe a downstairs brain reaction from an upstairs brain response. So it's not about the words yes and no necessarily, although they are chosen on purpose, because we, as human beings, we have often heard no and felt that urge to push back, or felt the disruption, our heart rate, or felt the anger, right? We have a story and a history with that around no, right? No is an important word and it can be used skillfully, but it's often used without skill. And then yes does tend to be more welcoming, but like this one teacher said really astutely, yes isn't always a signal of welcome. Right? It's not a hard warning maybe, but it's like, oh, my day is going to be hard. This person's just fawning. Yeah. So it's just a chance to experience downstairs versus upstairs and integrated, right? So it's thinking about for your children in your classroom, do they live in a world of no, don't, stop, directions and corrections all day long? Those can be interpreted as signals of warning, right? And they want to push back a lot of times. I don't want to wash my hands for the 7th time today. I don't want to put my toys away. You're telling me to, but I don't want to. And then, so how much time are they spending with downstairs brain activation versus attuned interactions? Not necessarily saying yes, but just attuned interactions, signals of welcome, so they can be more in the state that you felt when I did the yes. So it's just an invitation now for us to consider that's happening for children and for you all day long. Which state am I in? And interestingly, I always invite people to notice body sensations. People tend to live from here up. Now I get it, your body's with you all the time, but how often are you noticing your body? And a lot of times people have complicated relationships with their body. They don't like it. They don't feel good in their body. They have pain, or they carry weight, or numerous reasons. But the body has a lot going on in it, including we have a gut brain, a heart brain that signal to our enskulled brain all day long. So if we're not tuned into what's going on in our body, we're missing out on information and data. good, bad, neutral. There's data there. So we want to be able to just understand that, because all behavior is communication. And luckily, these tiny humans haven't learned yet to disconnect from their bodies. They're very body-based. Unfortunately, we tend to train them away from that. And I'm hoping you guys will take this information and not do that. Asking them, where do they feel something in their body? Telling them, it looks like your body is this. Am I with you? Did I get that right? Do you feel that? There's a seminal work in trauma called The Body Keeps the Score by Besser van der Kolk. And it really is the most prominent book in trauma work that really helps us understand that even though the past is over, it's not really past, and it's typically stored in our bodies. So just this afternoon, we'll do some body exercises so you can start to develop that relationship. We free up the connection. So both for you as the teacher, because you deserve that, and it help you stay in your integrated brain, and then for the child to start to develop this insight and understanding so that they can have the impulse control, the executive functioning, the focal attention. It's very hard to attend when your body's in dysregulated state. And in my experience, cross-culturally, children aren't going to learn that at home unless they have parents who are super in maybe to fitness. I don't know, but most people don't pay attention to their bodies. Okay. I'm going to do just a little bit more, and we're going to take a break, a 10-minute break in about 15 minutes. Okay. If you need a break earlier, go ahead. So now I want you to take a look at this video. And I want you to examine it from what we've studied so far in terms of the brain reasons for behavior. So this little boy in the red shirt, his name is Tim. And he's playing at free choice with this little boy and these two little girls. So that's the setup, right? Just free choice at a typical preschool classroom. This just happens to be a Head Start, but it's a preschool classroom. And I just want you to notice his behavior, the form of his behavior, right? What you see him do or not do. But I want you to think about what might be the brain reasons. So don't tell me he wanted the toy. That's not a brain reason. That's a mind reason. But what do you think's going on in his brain that led to his behavior? Okay. So I'm going to ask you just to look at this differently. You might be right. Whatever he does, he might do it because he wants his toy, wants a toy, he wants to, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the brain reasons. Try to explore what's going on for him there. So let me share my screen.
Look, I bring you a ladder. Wow! That's a trap. No, it's not a trap. It's called a ladder.
Okay, I feel like you're okay.
No, those are tabs. Oh, I need one. No, they are not hats. They're Bluetooth.
Okay, so real short answers to this, not a long story. What do you think the brain reasons are for the behavior that you saw?
You guys can shout out of it. He didn't feel like he was being heard.
Okay, and if he didn't feel like he was being heard, signal of welcome, signal of warning.
Warning, yeah.
Yeah, good, beautiful. Yep. So his downstairs brain was picking up on a signal of warning. And the way we describe that is he didn't feel he was being heard. Beautiful. So not being heard can be a signal of warning. Tuck that away, everybody. We all know that, but let's just put that into language. What else was going on in his brain? Brain reasons for behavior.
I don't know how to describe it appropriately, but kind of like that whole not enough. Like he panicked that he wasn't going to have what everybody else had.
So
Or is
what-
that,
No, that's good, but let's put it into brain reasons. So what was happening in the brain when he was perceiving that, you think?
fight or flight?
Yeah, totally. That's it. So again, yes, again, it's not wrong for us to talk about it in the way that like we originally, and it's our habit of talking about it, but it's not working for us as a field. Because then we start to think about all these strategies for that moment. And I want you to back up and work smarter, not harder. So of course, fight or flight happens, of course. And then for this child in particular, how often does it happen? And what would be some things we could do to prevent the fight or flight? So it's not just the story, it's the brain reason. Making the connection is just the more in-depth understanding and exploration. And it also avoids us shaming or blaming the child. Because even when people say like, well, he didn't feel heard, there can be a judgment on that. There wasn't when this participant said it. I'm not pointing you out, but I'm saying like, he didn't feel heard. So what? None of us gets heard. Life is tough, right? Or he panicked because there's never enough. Well, there's plenty. He doesn't need more. He needs to share. So I want to back it up so that we don't shame and blame the child, right? Just make sure we don't. Okay. What other brain things were going on? Fight, flight, signals of warning. What else?
Any ideas?
I'll give you a little hint. Think about arousal is one of the downstairs brain capacities, and also motivation, arousal and motivation. So he moved his body. So what did you notice when he moved his body? I'll help you out. It's totally okay. This is great because this means you're learning new things. So when Tim's friend said, no, those are Tim's, kind of like these kids, you know, your kids, they know when children have challenging behavior. So this kid's kind of trying to warn Maria, girl, do not mess with Tim's stuff, right? Like, no, those are Tim's. Tim turned and he noticed, he was aroused and he looked at her. And then he got up and walked over to her. And I don't know if you noticed this, but his first thing was this. He didn't start with pulling her hair. So he approached her to get his needs met. So he was in the integrated brain. He didn't start off flip lid. But in the moment that she pulled back the Duplos and didn't give that to him, he flipped his lid and reacted because his brain perceived this was a crisis, right? You're going to inhibit my motivation to use these toys. So it's not just about the toy, it's about the circuitry in the brain. Because I don't know, I wasn't there, but Tim must have had a plan for those Duplos. Right? The behavior is telling me that's likely. I could be wrong, but that's a likely hypothesis. Just like when he pulled the ladder from the boy and said, it's not a track, it's a ladder. He's got a plan. His executive function skills were in high order. I'm planning, I'm initiating, I'm organizing, and I'm trying to carry out my play. Maria, danger, tried to thwart my plan. So from a brain perspective, the downstairs brain took over because Tim's plan was going to be interrupted. It wasn't about Maria, it was about his plan. Thoughts about that? So if you're sitting there thinking, wah, 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 Laura, what do I do? What do I do? I'm purposely not telling you what to do because people have been telling you what to do for your whole career. I'm trying to teach you how to think first, and then you're going to choose what to do. So it's the thinking that's often been missing. We get a lot of strategies thrown at us as teachers, but thinking about children's behavior before we choose the strategy is where I like to be different. And it's often not super satisfying at first, but it will be over time, I trust. And don't worry, after the break, we're going to get to more strategies. I've been giving you strategies. Thinking is a strategy. Yeah. But just know it's coming. More is coming. Any thoughts about that? Questions? Okay, Colleen, what do you think about a 10-minute break? Does that work? Everybody can
That
stretch.
works.
Okay, great. So I'll see you guys at 9:32.
Thank you.
Thank you.